He walked away convinced the world would applaud him forever. She stayed where people know faces and winter tests every heart. In a small American town, snow doesn't roar. It reveals truths quietly. When Ravi left, pride warmed him more than love ever could. But storms came fast. Life hit him harder than he was ready for. And when he returned, the town was lit for Christmas. But he carried silence from a darker season. "Grab a coat, it's freezing out here," she once told him, unaware the cold was now inside him too. The same street, the same cafe, a completely different man. Because some transformations don't shout. They sit quiet until God gives them a voice. If you're tired of stories where people break and never heal, stay until the end. This one ends differently. A story of pride that fell, and a heart rebuilt in grace long enough to love again. Subscribe for more stories that God rewrites. Where broken isn't the end, humility is the doorway. Ravi boarded the train just as the first snow dusted the town rooftops. He didn't look back. Pride sat straight on his shoulders like a tailored coat. People waved on the platform anyway. This was the kind of town that waves. "Road's getting slick out there, son," an old man said kindly behind him. Silence answered first. He wanted applause, not weather warnings. But winter already knew his name, even if the world soon would not. And pride walked him out faster than purpose ever could have carried him. The station bell chimed a familiar hometown melody before departure. Lights were hung early for Christmas, glimmering across the square. "Grab your coat, it's freezing out there," Karen shouted toward him once. He smirked then. Now he didn't even turn when someone else repeated it. The cold outside felt smaller than the fire of ambition inside him. But snow has a way of returning as metaphor later in life. He wasn't thinking about metaphors, he was leaving to become one. His suitcase was leather-trimmed and heavier than anyone expected from him. So was his heart, though no one could see that kind of luggage. Success sounded like a promise he believed he could force into permanence. Karen had been gentle to him. He translated it as admiration. He assumed her kindness meant she agreed with the throne of pride he'd built. But agreeing is different from kneeling, and kindness is different from surrender. Winter, patient, watched both without taking sides. Yet, the cafe workers peeked through frosted windows as the train exhaled steam. Small-town cafes don't rush people. They pour slowly and listen between refills. "Pretty sure you'll miss that cinnamon season, kid," a woman joked near him. He laughed, but only at the joke, not the truth hidden inside it. He believed purpose was fueled by distance, not community invitations. What he didn't know was this town held the first drafts of his redemption. Pride doesn't edit drafts, it deletes them. He left them folded in the snow. Karen wiped cafe tables that same afternoon, humming quietly. Her resilience carried the softness of someone who anchors hope daily. She didn't know his heart would crack exactly in the season it looked strongest. She didn't pray for his fall, but for his awakening someday. Because awakening sounds powerful but begins small. Quiet. "God keep his steps warm even if the road turns cold," she whispered once. And that whisper was sharper than pride, even wrapped in gentleness. His boots left the snow unbothered, deep prints trailing away from town. Boots don't apologize. They carry whatever heart guides them. Karen noticed the prints. She memorized, not judged them. Purpose sometimes looks like staying when everyone expects leaving. That day her staying quietly claimed more authority than his ambition. Because some leadership is earned in endurance, not platforms. Pride left prints. Grace measured how long the ground remembers them. The river by the square was frosting over when he left. Towns like this take photos, but more for memory than media. "Bet you'll be back when the thaw tells you to," someone had joked months before. He rolled his eyes, now remembering the words. Words sometimes echo longer when they're spoken in casual prophecy. Pride interprets prophecy as competition. But prophecy doesn't compete. It waits, usually beside someone humming at a cafe table. His name was cheered in rooms bigger than this town later. But bigger rooms don't remember the right tone to speak a name gently. "Doubt that applause will keep you warm, son," Winter seemed to hint. Too poetic for a farewell sign, he assumed. Winter wasn't poetic. Winter was appointment-based truth. He loved invitation, but not accountability yet. The town held invitations. God held the appointment. Winter carried the folder. The church at the square stayed glowing while snow crowned its roof. Small-town churches don't shout, they echo. And echoes sometimes carry more muscle than microphones. He had liked the echo until ambition convinced him noise meant impact. Karen cleaned the back pews once, while snow tapped stained glass. Purpose over popularity, she whispered then too. And whispers become foundations more often than shouts ever suspect. His last look toward town was through a streaked train window glass. The snow blurred the street signs just enough to look symbolic. But symbolism wasn't meant to blur purpose from him. Symbolism was warning label written in snowflake ink. Temporary, factual, dissolving. Karen didn't run after him. Running is loud. Staying would speak louder later, because some storms don't roar. They rewrite identities quietly through exposure. He left sure of impact. God remained sure of timing. His inbox filled with congratulations that Winter seemed to respect. Congratulations are fast. Redemption is time-signed mail delivered slower. He wanted overnight statues, not daily steps. But health in the heart grows in schedules pride can't compress. Karen wrote postcards he didn't answer, but none carried bitterness. Changed hearts start by answering God first, she knew. He assumed change begins by impressing people. Impressing melted in the first snow. The train tracks were covered again the next morning. Tracks don't explain pride, they transport it. He began believing distance builds legacy, but distance built only appetite. Appetite for roots he would not recognize missing until Winter returned personally. Karen brewed coffee he didn't know would become communion later. Some hearts need breaking before they can hold, someone had joked once. Joke or prophecy, Winter didn't annotate it. God approved the document anyway. His social media bloom warmed him more than any human voice. Digital applause sings louder but hugs less. Sure hope those likes keep you warm, someone joked on his last night in town. He believed warmth was altitude-based. Climb high, leave small towns below. Karen prayed phrases Winter didn't need to translate. God translated them daily anyway. Because God doesn't rewrite success into silence. He rewrites silence into success with humility long enough to love. He assumed emerging means climbing onto bigger platforms. But emerging sometimes means descending into the right station silently. Life comes at you fast here. God comes at you on purpose later. Karen knew. He loved the idea of legacy, but not the idea of kneeling. Karen sometimes knelt after applause first. Faith holds longer than footsteps, she whispered. And whispers don't sound weak when heaven signs them quietly. The snow tap danced over the train roof by his first destination. Winter moved in with him in checked baggage form. Purpose was still finding his zip code. Karen cleaned the cafe, thinking he'd be reshaped someday not by environment, but by the heart's response to it. Because the town thought he left proud. God wrote his return date quietly anyway. The town took photos of snow angels that afternoon. Snow angels don't rush redemption. They illustrate it later. He assumed illustrations are approvals. God approved the timing instead. Karen served cocoa for neighbors knowing hearts thaw differently. Changed hearts don't brag. They bow before God gives them a voice, she knew. His suitcase carried torn applause that melted eventually. But Winter carried purpose that found his name better than applause ever hugged it. 3 winters passed before he would think of town again personally. Now Winter looked small for a farewell moment, he thought. But snow applied metaphors gently too. Karen once said, grab a coat, unaware coats don't warm the heart from inside. Purpose sometimes looks like leaving, to learn humility. That learning didn't roar. It prepared his name to sound different someday, and that name once echoed in town gently. He left before kneeling. But snow knelt on rooftops without commentary, and small towns kneel over mugs of coffee without needing big titles. Because some redemption stories begin quietly at departure. The town remembered his prince. God already remembered his return date written in snowflake ink. Karen opened the cafe door before dawn, the cold biting her cheeks awake. Small towns rise early, not for hustle but for ritual and reassurance. She flicked on the warm counter lights, letting them bloom like a soft sunrise inside. "Grab a cup, sweetheart. Warm up your hands first," her co-worker Amber said gently. The kettle hummed deeper than conversations sometimes need to be. Karen smiled, knowing warmth shared is warmth multiplied. Outside, Snow began painting lessons pride cannot interrupt. The Christmas garlands were handmade, pine-scented and laced with hope. Town winters here don't just test coats, they refine hearts quietly too. Karen brewed cinnamon coffee, the smell wrapping the room in memory-soft tissue. "Winter came fast this year, didn't it?" Amber joked with familiarity. Karen laughed, placing mugs like punctuation for unwritten letters. Purpose doesn't need thunder to feel truthful. It just needs repetition to become rhythm. Her neighbors prepared for Thanksgiving turkey season already. The town shares meals, not opinions, when hunger visits a heart. Karen sometimes bakes pies for families who need more than sugar, because sugar is quick. Presence is slow, ingredient by ingredient. Ravi left chasing noise. Karen stayed building echo-based foundations, and foundations respect the cold when it arrives. They hold anyway. The church bell chimed across the square, winter carried in its tone. Square churches don't compete, they invite. Karen paused to listen, her breath mingling with the cold morning mist. "Grab your coat, it's freezing out there," someone shouted passing by. Karen wrapped a scarf tighter, grateful for loud humor in quiet towns. Some humor repeats later, as revelation. God didn't send winter to silence her. He sent it to deepen her. The library hosted Christmas readings of the A Christmas Carol. Karen brought kids cocoa while they rehearsed carols beside snow-dusted steps. "Don't rush, Grace, winter's got its own pace," her friend Jimmy said lightly. Karen nodded, placing whipped cream on 2 cocoa cups with calm precision. Whispered prayers from her heart rose like steam, visible enough for God to read. Purpose sometimes whispers, but whispers signed by heaven don't arrive weak. Small town roads iced over often, forcing slower decisions. Karen offered rides to elders without needing documented applause. "Roads slick. Let me grab the truck," Jimmy said with interior town certainty. Karen climbed into the passenger seat, handing him coffee for warmth, not thanks. And warmth spoken casually can sound like prophecy too. She wasn't chasing statues. She was keeping appointments quietly with heaven. The town held community dinners by candlelight near Christmas Eve. Karen led donations silently, stacking tables with more care than prestige requires. "Changed hearts hold longer than snow holds steps," Jimmy said, joking again, but not erasable. Karen placed napkins, bread rolls, and cranberries gently. Some traditions feed bodies, some feed belief systems. The Square Cafe fed both. Her resilience carried plates warmer than ambition could annotate. Winter nights blanketed the town, lights dim, but faith unbothered. Karen offered coats to people before offering explanations for cold seasons. God edits schedules. "We edit cocoa," Jimmy said lightly again, making her chuckle. Karen believed emergence sounds like endurance. Locals don't monetize loudly. But heaven monetizes endurance differently. In belonging, not trophies. Purpose fell heavier on her. But heavier isn't harsh when love carries it quietly. The town hosted Christmas tree lighting as a community. Karen held Liam's tiny mittened hand, Liam from a neighbor family, showing presence over prestige. "Changed hearts don't brag, they bow," Jimmy said again, smiling, unaware his jokes double as sermon drafts. Karen placed cookies she baked, cinnamon and ginger, comforting neighbors. Winter saturates gently when it carries metaphors. Some leadership is earned in silent favor-based season passes. God prints the ticket quietly. Winter checks the coat later. Karen sometimes organized charity markets during winter, selling pies and hot cocoa. "Small towns don't forget your name when winter knocks. God doesn't either," she said, smiling again. Her heart memorized departure prints, not winter's documentation stamps. But God stamps return dates without needing ink. Karen hummed carols too quietly to sound commercial. But faith-based carols don't need sponsorship. They just hold. Ravi had deleted postcards. Karen stayed writing metaphor postcards winter would deliver back later symbolically. She believed apology mail arrived slower when pride didn't post the letter. But God posts letters without needing applause, tracking numbers. Karen sometimes knelt for others in prayer silently. Because kneeling is loud to heaven, even quiet to towns. She merely whispered, and Winter overheard quietly too. The Christmas Eve table at the square was community-based, donations-based, hunger-based, presents-based. Karen passed cocoa, coats, cinnamon rolls, all lovingly seasonal without annotation. It's a wonderful life. Karen taped a chalkboard sign by the counter, hand-lettered, looping with small-town warmth. Hot cocoa, cinnamon hearts, and winter mercies served here, it read. In towns like this, handwriting is decor and theology at once. She hung a menorah candle beside Christmas ornaments, neighbors gifting recipes, not debates. Karen wiped counters knowing that belonging needs no viral noise to echo far. Purpose grows in the cadence of kettles and conversations whispered over cups. Outside, Winter leaned close, patient, editing hearts without ever raising its voice. Families swapped leftovers from pumpkin pie across porches after Thanksgiving. "Honey, grab a slice before the snow buries the roads," Amber joked again. Karen boxed pie for neighbors who arrived with stories needing more shelter than sugar. She loved that interiors here glow like dusk inside even before evening falls. Some storms scrawl humility into resumes pride never earned formally. But resumes signed by God don't need bullet points, they need endurance. And endurance tastes like cinnamon steam rising before someone comes back changed. Town youth rehearsed carols for the winter festival at the square gazebo. CapCut always seems distant from places that edit lives by lamps instead. But Karen sometimes edited charity clips there anyway. Subtle sparkles, not spectacle. She filmed homemade markets, pairing scripture voiceovers with winter bravado held gently. Because grace walks quiet too, but it carries steel when heaven steadies the footstep. That footstep was hers daily. Mitten soft, still unbothered by altitude envy. Cold nights, polished minds. God polished hearts. Purpose polished both slowly. Karen delivered spice breads to elders while snow tapped stained glass shops by the square. Shops like this smelled of ginger and wood-smoked fireplaces neighbors kindle without headlines. Jimmy shoveled walks, saying roads are slick. Unaware sermons echo loudest in casual tone. Karen handed him coffee as snowfall quilted rooftops without taking sides. Because purpose doesn't envy altitude when community clears the driveway. Faith doesn't shout. It steadies. Timing doesn't brag. It appoints. And Christmas lights gleamed like post-it notes for stories God already signed for delivery. Ravi had assumed legacy begins by climbing out. Karen learned legacy here begins by not leaving. Townfolk set tables warmer than ambition summaries can measure. Karen sometimes prayed over postcards unsent by pride, address lines invisible but accurate to heaven. Because valleys don't need GPS when grace knows the street by name. Changed hearts don't compete with snow. They thaw for it, Jimmy joked again. Karen didn't need big rooms. She kept the appointments small enough to hold purpose personally. Winter crowned the church roof across the square, bells ringing memory not metrics. Snow's got its own sermon zip code, Amber joked before the cocoa refill. Karen topped whipped cream mugs calmly, never competing with prophecy footnotes. The town fed forgiveness seasonally without debating pride's resume. Karen stayed writing redemption drafts anyone still leaving would not annotate. Because drafts delivered by God don't compete with applause weather forecasts. They just return. Usually when winter bows quietly too. 3 winters passed, threading snow into rooftops like quiet reminders. Karen learned the rhythm of cold mornings and resilient routines. This town didn't measure legacy in trophies, but in tire tracks that stayed plotted. She delivered cocoa and pies when roads were getting slick with snow. Purpose felt warm in her schedule, even when applause was missing. Because God writes return dates without needing loud tracking numbers. Winter waited like a chapter header for Heart's Pride once archived. Ravi's name faded in distant rooms as Boston's winter knocked earlier. Larger rooms forgot tones. Small towns polished them anyway. Karen warmed mugs saying roads are slick, grab a cup. That casual prophecy hugged hearts without blog footnotes. She wasn't thinking about altitudes, she was thinking about neighbors who stayed. Faith doesn't shout postcards. Postcards echo loudest after silence clarifies the mailing address. Winter didn't roar. But metaphors whispered here bow first to heaven before town summaries appear. Karen sometimes stood by the frosted window counting snowfall, not metrics, because metrics track applause. Snowfall tracks transformation slower. Life comes at you fast, Jimmy said again, helping her shovel walks. Karen handed him coffee, breath rising like faith-mist signals sharpened by winter. But wholeness doesn't compete. It extends the table instead, seasonally, personally, purposefully. She knew that thawing begins by answering God before the weather forecast hugs handwriting, and purpose felt warm inside anyway. Christmas Eve, volunteers stacked tables for families who stayed plotted here. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 3 over donation boxes unsent by pride. But donation boxes signed by God don't need bullet lists. They need presence long enough. Changed hearts thaw slower than snow holds steps, Amber joked again. Karen nodded, smiling wisely. Unaware town jokes are theology postcards Winter delivers slower. Winter's sermon zip code was patience-based medically for the heart. God stored the mailing address without ever bragging about ink inventories. Karen once wrote private thank you notes to cooks who delivered homemade Thanksgiving plates. "Honey, grab a coat. Night's dropping fast now," someone joked passing by. Karen bundled boxes of spice bread and cocoa for elders who didn't ask for altitude-based apologies. Cold nights polished towns, but God polished hearts differently through communal warmth. Purpose sometimes tastes like winters that God scheduled without competition. Karen topped cocoa cups with whipped punctuation with morning sun-based theology, not viral numbers. And snowfall bowed gently too then. Townfolk swapped tire chains by meta-commentary-based winter nights. Karen sometimes organized drive-by charity dinners before Christmas Eve. So volunteers lined streets handing cinnamon rolls instead of applause surveys. Because small towns don't forget sins. They remember them only long enough to forgive them warmly. But forgiving melts slower when God breathes on temporary resume postcards. Karen sometimes knelt praying over chalkboard signs that interior towns read differently. Purpose grows kettle deep when winter bows gently. Ravi had thought emerging looks like climbing out. But emerging sometimes means descending onto a different chapter without thunder. Karen cleaned charity truck seats, handing coffee to drivers exhausted by slick altitudes. Winter didn't annotate kindly. But annotation belongs to heaven. Towns simply illustrate it when hands thaw enough. Faith hugs louder after silence. Someone passing said warmly months before. Karen handed cocoa quietly, praying faith-paved postcards thaw purpose differently. And snow-tapped porches gently that afternoon unaware. Townfolks decorated porches near Thanksgiving with pine, cocoa, and small-town jokes spread warmly. Karen sometimes sold spice breads, raising funds for neighbor surgeries pride once refused to annotate. But annotating surgeries recurs loudest in heaven when faith doesn't monetize valuations. Karen once said, "Don't rush grace." Unaware, rushing deletes metaphor chapter header notes. Some leadership is earned in silent flurries without needing humble looks into train departure windows. Purpose sometimes whispers. The town's charity market by the square gazebo jingled lightly. Karen joked changed hearts start by answering God first. Town youth sang carols with cinnamon breath warm enough winter accepted as signature-based metaphors. Faith holds longer than footsteps, someone passing said months earlier, joking but not annotation-based. Karen nodded, humming cocoa rations, not viral numbers. Snow polished both without commentary-based sidebars. And winters crossed his path gently. Karen sometimes stood by the riverbank, not chasing digital thaw-based track postcards. Road slick. Grab cocoa instead, someone passing joked again. Karen handed cocoa quietly, praying winter's metaphors hold purpose personally, not publicly. Larger rooms forgot tones, but towns kneel over mugs without documented prestige. Purpose sometimes whispers, but whispers signed by heaven don't arrive weak. Inside, winter began softening hearts before anyone resumed commentary trajectories. Karen topped cocoa cups with whipped punctuation without needing digital snow-coated footnotes. Karen believed some postcards arrive slower when pride archived drafts without ever mailing them warmly. But mailing doesn't brag tracking numbers when God breathes on purpose. He walked away proud, someone repeated months before. She didn't know how long the snow would tap dance geography scripts delivered quietly into livelihoods returning differently someday. But she measured tire marks that stayed physically plotted locally without sermon annotation receipts. She didn't monetize purpose. Purpose monetized her silence through endurance. Cold nights polished both town gazebos without needing altitude-based apology metrics. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 3, unaware snow-coated metaphors live longer when God schedules return dates. But heaven reads depths differently. Deeper than cold nights, volunteers annotate theology summaries within cozy rooms. Smaller towns measure prints only long enough to thaw them carefully. Purpose grows steady on silent appointment emails carefully sorted by God, not applause inbox. Karen topped cocoa mugs with morning sun-based theology, not thunder, and snow-painted foundation-level seasonal citations she didn't need to translate visually yet. Town youth sang carols near Thanksgiving. Spice bread swapped like casual theology postcards. Karen boxed cocoa for families who stayed community-based without surveys. Some leadership wears mittens in cafes, not resumes. Purpose grows kettle deep here. Night drops fast too. Larger rooms forget tones. Small towns polish them anyway. Snow melts slower. Was the sermon vibe satellites she assumed? Purpose over popularity, she whispered once again. Winter came fast. The town repeated often. Unaware, winter repeats later as metaphor for transformation first mailed to heaven. Karen cleaned the donation truck seats, handing coffee to drivers exhausted by slick roads pride never documented kindly. But documentation belongs to God, and towns illustrated only when hands thaw enough to hold cocoa mugs purposely. She prayed quiet statements unsent by pride but mailed by God, because God prints return dates without ink competitions. Purpose sometimes whispers. Winter overheard her whisper first, editing hearts until Christmas glimmered gorgeous in theology postcard delivery cadence. Karen packaged both pies and resilience softly. Ravi had assumed his public inbox would crown legacy into granite statues. Purpose felt smaller for a farewell sign now. Snow had a gentle theology appointment he didn't annotate. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 3 quietly, unaware annotation is heaven's stationary. She topped cocoa cups with morning sun punctuation silently, and snowfall quilted rooftops saying nothing harsh, only deeply seasonal. The same town engine hummed winter lessons into postcards unsent by pride. But God posted return dates without needing bolt case fame disclaimers. Karen believed agreeing is different from kneeling, kindness different from surrender. But return letters start by answering God before the weather forecast prints redemption drafts warm enough. Purpose sometimes whispers, but whispers signed by heaven don't arrive weak. Cold nights polished minds, God polished hearts, and purpose synergies thawed foundation-level seasons away, where cafes remember tones better. Karen sometimes knelt for others in prayer silently, because kneeling is loud to heaven, even quiet to towns. The Christmas Eve table carried belonging, not titles. Snow-painted lessons pride never annotated kindly. But God stamps return dates without needing ink. Karen brewed cocoa for families who had stayed. Teachings melted slower than pride documented departure prints. Purpose is learned in ice-coated routines without chasing applause metrics. And snow tapped the church roof gently. Pray-focused gazebos don't need bullet points among donation pie bazaars faith once organized before rebranding. Purpose over popularity, Karen said, looking at departure prints he left unannotated kindly. This town polished metaphors quietly where winter crashes downs altitude summaries, not context-based metrics. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 3 while roads iced slower. Larger rooms forget tones. Towns like this bow over mugs without needing viral stats. Faith holds longer than footsteps when God schedules return mail delivered quieter, and snow crowned them anyway. Karen was restocking the counter when the news reached town quietly. Trains running late today. Storms picking up out there, Amber said. Karen tied fresh Christmas ribbons around donation baskets anyway. Purpose anchored her steps slower than the snow fell outside. Ravi lost nothing in town summaries anymore. Pride had melted from his suitcase before arriving. But God printed his return date into winter again without asking for applause. And winter bent the knee first quietly. Snow crowned the station rooftop again when the train exhaled steam. Ravi stepped off not proud, but reshaped kettle deep in patience-based theology. The same station lady repeated, "Grab a coat, honey." Unaware coats don't thaw hearts inside. Karen saw his name in donation bazaar forms earlier months before, but now winter delivered him differently physically, because returning looks quiet until it speaks warmly. He didn't bring congratulations. He brought silence that bowed. The church at the square held winter candlelight dinners tasting like belonging, faith-based, not popularity-based. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 4, reading hearts not metrics when snowfall tapped stained glass. Because purpose hugs louder after silence, answers God first personally. A small-town sermon doesn't roar, it repeats politely. Karen believed small towns remember names only long enough to forgive them warmly. God remembered his name longer, though, at foundation depth. "Stay until the end," she whispered again. Unaware someone coming back changed was already God's appointment. Ravi carried no congratulations inbox that night. Winter had frosted over his public applause drafts anyway. Instead, his boots tapped the cafe porch holding purpose-themed mittens, not granite statues. Karen didn't run a dramatic chase scene. She stood. Endurance is loudest to heaven quietly. Outside, snowfall typed paragraphs only God sent enough quiet to check temperature-coded metaphors documented long enough. Because documentation belongs to God. Leaving belongs to the train. But returns belong to Grace hometown counters anyway. Christmas cocoa steam rose between them next morning. Unsponsored, community-signed, still emotionally sharpened by slick roads. Karen poured hot cocoa into porcelain mugs shaped like winter sermons. "Roads getting slick, grab a cup," Jimmy said, unaware jokes become sermon vibes sideways. Karen nodded, smiling, thinking about elders who once partied Thanksgiving plates loudly. Purpose sat warm inside her night, shrinking no chapters, only multiplying grace. Ravi didn't ask for his name trending. Karen once organized youth charity trucks markets, now kneeling for hearts not likes, raising markets, spice breads and carols boxed physically. Ravi opened her door saying nothing, but bowing louder than footsteps anyway. Karen nodded, knitting mittens for families who once joked winter came faster. Some legacy threads look like footsteps leaving town but melting later, seasoning God's return dates imprinted differently. She prayed quietly winter didn't annotate sidebars on soul-coded resumes. But annotation belongs to heaven. Ruthlessness belongs to the mind, welcomed restored anyway by cocoa counters and daily steps, not altitude. Purpose filled both schedules politely. Karen believed letters arriving quietly taste sweeter when hands hold on to hope, foundation-level seasons away from noise. Ravi thought forgiveness resumes don't roar, they repeat. Maybe snow-coated chats fold into winter vibes anyway. Karen brewed cocoa, placing Christmas signs saying winter came fast. Unaware being loud to heaven is enough to thaw hearts properly. "Pretty sure change starts by answering God first," she said, unaware Ravi was changed by winter, not altitude envy. Because altitude built appetite, not legacy. Grace builds both personally, not publicly. Ravi stepped into rhythm slower. The snow tapped this town's spire-based theology and market bazaars softly, while youth sang carols warmed already by cocoa punctuation prints. Winter's dropping fast. Purposes rising slower, someone passing joked. Karen handed cocoa mugs, faith-based heavy gazebo tables, honestly, without podium debates. But debates happen in heaven when God stores return mail. Karen topped cocoa cups without needing colors or sidebars to ask for big city fame disclaimers. Ravi thawed kettle deep. The river near the square became iced rhetoric where elders once swapped pies, trucking tire chains without bullet points. Ravi didn't bring bullet points now. He brought thawing depth instead. Karen keyed legacy markets quietly, too large for mountain envy, but small enough to hold porch theology messages stable. Some storms don't roar. They rewrite identities. Jimmy joked, unaware that was sermon phrasing from winter's repeat calendar. Change looked quiet until it spoke warmer than altitude envy could delete. But deleting belonged to pride. Returning will speak louder. Karen sprayed sugar cookies with cinnamon sugar across winter charity trucks' physical donation lanes. Ravi's humility rewrote like melted snow, not applause-coded postcards. Karen delivered mugs for family meals and neighbors' valley returns. Unaware cold exposure is symbolic when God moves silently. Changed looked quiet until it spoke faith-based. But speaking is loudest when kneeling is heard first. Karen didn't need trophies or altitude-coded resume complaints. Faith rebuilt what pride melted, she said, unaware the station spire-based theology remembered his prints physically too. Changed hearts start by answering God first. But winter touches them anyway. Christmas lights spilled over donation baskets hand-tied by Karen herself. Ravi didn't apologize loudly, but his suitcase preached quietly. Karen nodded, seeing his resilience forged slower than snowfall anyway. Faith doesn't brag about return dates. God posts them gently. Town porches iced over, now kneeling for snowfall, not applause. Karen sometimes prayed Psalm 2 over cocoa mugs, but towns like this record battles by lantern photos. Ravi looked back, smaller but deeper than altitude-coded fame travels early bird declarations ever measured. Karen topped cocoa cups politely, saying God writes quieter letters sometimes. But those letters bow deeper than any smirk farewell. Ravi arrived without explanations, but presence prints don't need public ticks. They need time enough to thaw. Karen once organized Carol chunk bazaars, stacking donation tables warm enough to hug without surveys. Faith multiplied her without sponsorship. God returned him quietly. Karen didn't monetize the exit. Purpose monetized her staying anyway. Larger rooms forget tones. This town does not. Snow's got its own sermon zip code. Karen said calmly, unaware winter touches heart's pride cannot compress. But compressing belonged to pride. Rewriting belonged to heaven. Karen looked at station prints, once snow-coated quotes without ever needing numbers. But numbers melt when pride deletes them. God doesn't. Reports delivered by winter don't roar. They repeat politely. Karen topped cocoa cups with morning sun-based theology again gently. Ravi returned. The town was ready. Karen noticed his truck first. Mud splashed, headlights dim, snow stacking quiet. Grab a cup before you collapse. A voice in her memory echoed like déjà vu. The bell above the cafe door chimed as if recognizing the timing itself. Ravi stepped inside without swagger, coat drenched, eyes lowered. Same street, same cafe. A man smaller, deeper, quieter. Because winter doesn't roar when it finally arrives for someone personally. It just knocks and waits to see who opens. Amber slid a cocoa toward her, saying, "Roads are brutal tonight." Unaware brutality wasn't outside anymore. Brutality was what life had mailed into his posture for rewriting. Karen didn't rush the stare, but Mercy's got its own hometown pace. Ravi held the cup like someone gripping a truce agreement delicately. "Storm came at you fast, huh?" Jimmy said, entering behind them. Karen remembered that line. Months earlier from someone else's casual prophecy. Ravi nodded, realizing some prophecies don't need scripture tags. They need silence acknowledgement. Karen placed the cup warmer than altitude envy could annotate later. Jimmy shook snow from his boots before saying jokes fold into theology differently this winter. Ravi smiled, half-mended, knowing his heart would crack here eventually. Because crack is installment paid before healed is certified silently. Karen made room without clamor. That movement alone was enough to seal CTR for heaven. Changed hearts don't blog about winter. They bow for it. Someone passing months before said, joking then too. Now silence crowned prophecy into his posture. The cafe smelled like roasted humility. Cinnamon and community verdict spoken softly. Karen watched his fingers thaw around the porcelain warmth. Not asking for rear-view apologies, but reading micro-expressions, winter calls acknowledgements. Ravi had no tracking number for postcards she once delivered to his public inbox. But God posted his return without shipping coordinates. Roads were slick. Hearts were awakening quietly anyway. Karen didn't annotate championships. Championship was kneeling long enough in humility. Ravi once loved applause that melted faster than snow could crown him. Unaware. Karen topped cocoa without competition. Competitions happen in heaven when authenticity signs typed letters for boss twist earlier than deserved. God clutches timing better than applause melts altitude envy, Jimmy joked again. Unaware jokes can double as sermon drafts. Ravi nodded. Outside, winter tapped stained glass windows like seasonal registrar for souls. Karen knelt for folded gingerbread donations youth drafted weeks prior. But donations registers melt later when God stamps return dates quietly. Ravi read the frosted street signs last month. Unaware metaphors bow quietly in smaller towns. And smaller towns bow together by mugs of cocoa punching papers for heaven. Purpose over popularity. Karen said quietly, unaware that feature of CTR multiplies mugs, not conferences. Karen boxed baked bread for neighbors weeks before this winter festival. Ravi once assumed that greatness would arrive by climbs, not cocoa counters, unaware. She prayed quietly for others who had surgery nights, once not annotation-based. Ravi stood where tracks were not measured, but stories delivered slower. Valleys don't need GPS when grace knows the name by default. Ravi's suitcase carried no apology notes typed formally ever archived there. But God mailed winter table adjustments anyway. Karen stood by donation boxes, winter smudged, not bitter, but warmth measured by heaven's hands instead. Ravi read the chalkboard looping line months before. Some hearts need breaking before they can hold remorse properly. He folded that line into snow-topped memory citations. Because citing is for scholars. Forgiving is for heaven-tracked daily walk prints. Karen picked prints, not judgments. Ravi returned carrying silence, not swagger. And silence is loud to God when timing bows first. Karen sprayed gingerbread scents youth baked days before Christmas Eve dinners. Neighbors swapped leftovers from failing pie markets. Cinnamon youth knelt earlier. Ravi held the cup warmer than any annotation from altitude-coded architects. But heaven reads architecture differently. Blueprint for souls saved by daily steps, not mountain envy. Karen stacked cookies for market bazaars once unsponsored. Ravi smiled smaller, deeper, molded by snow, not altitude. Karen didn't run after him when storms arrived. Running is loud. Staying speaks louder later. Ravi had once smirked at winter. Now winter thawed him anyway. Because pride melts when God blows on bearings and small-town trucks. Purpose sits calm until it speaks warmer than altitude envy ever could. Karen sometimes recited whispered prayers for others, kettle-based. Karen delivered spice breads, raising funds for donation lanes, winter printed slower. Ravi didn't annotate storms. Storms annotate life until humility sharpens truth enough. Karen didn't debit the exit. God printed return dates without ledger ink competitions. Ravi returned. The same sign still crowned his steps anyway. The station bell sang hometown winter tapes into donation baskets youth stored weeks earlier form. Ravi didn't bring certificates. Certificates happen in heaven when silence hugs truth quieter. Karen once sold spice cookie bazaars, stacking donation pie racks, hammered early bird before Advent Day. Ravi stood reading postcards, photos she never needed to translate hats. His jaw forging new truce for hearth-space town, gently forging faith first. Valleys don't roar when grace hosts hearth rank renewal forms carefully. Ravi bowed kettle deep, physically aware the chest warm inside him was not altitude-coded. Karen believed bigger platforms hold less warmth than riverside cocoa scenes quietly. Ravi once assumed success was altitude-based. Altitude built appetite, not legacy. Karen sometimes knelt after applause to store postcards. Youth didn't need trending annotations. Ravi didn't compete with snow. He thawed for it. Because thaw is louder later when families greet verdict gently without surveys. Ravi returned. Not loud. Changed. Because changes seasoned by heaven don't arrive weak. Karen cleaned donation truck seats that interior towns documented slower than snow prints, not erasable. Ravi looked at her saying nothing, but endurance is loudest to heaven quietly. Outside, snow crowned the church, bells ringing memory, not metrics. Purpose crowns endurance differently here, Jimmy said gently. Karen nodded, unaware purpose sounds weighted but not harsh when community clears the driveway first. Ravi didn't bring congratulations that afternoon. Winter had melted his applause paragraphs eventually. Karen placed delivery cocoa warming hearts physically. Christmas sermon youth once archived kindly without needing front-page disclaimers. God prints footprints personally. Winter prints them socially. Purpose sometimes whispers, but heaven hears the cadence anyway. Karen believed agreeing is different from kneeling. Kneeling echoes louder after snowcaps quietly refine donation lane rhythm. Ravi nodded, realizing metaphors don't compete. They frost and thaw on appointment-based timelines heaven already mailed ahead of pride transcripts. Karen topped cocoa cups with daily steps, because faith multiplies her without sponsorship, and purpose-sized fervored of 15. But heaven grades differently. Karen once whispered, "Don't rush grace," unaware winter itself would bow gently too. Ravi exhaled steam the next morning, unaware timing was God's draft, silently unfolding redemption postcards warm enough to grant second-chance leadership in a town that holds mugs longer than applause ever could. Karen handed him cinnamon coffee gently. Winter nights crowned both donation baskets without needing coordinates. Karen sometimes knelt, reading Psalm 2 quietly, unaware bowing is loudest to heaven quietly. Ravi returned carrying silence, not swagger. And silence was loud to God when timing bowed first. The snow outside grew heavier, but the quiet inside Ravi grew deeper. Karen noticed the shift. His silence was no longer the awkward kind. "Some storms hush a man before heaven gives him back a voice," Jimmy said. Ravi wasn't fighting for altitude anymore, he was learning depth. And depth changes posture before it changes reputation. Karen didn't push questions. Grace has its own patient temperature. Purpose was warm, slowly returning, cup by cup. The town moved gently through Thanksgiving leftovers and iced-over sidewalks. But no sidewalk sermon carried bitterness after footprints melted enough. Karen once whispered, "Don't rush grace unaware, winter carries appointments too." Ravi saw neighbors trading pies, not praise. Because smaller towns remember names long enough only to polish forgiveness. But heaven remembers names differently, deeper, louder, quieter. Purpose sometimes begins answering God first. Karen saw his reflection in the cafe window one evening. His stubble carried appointment-based metaphors, unsponsored, not trending. "Changed hearts don't blog loudly," the town repeated casually. Karen served cinnamon bread he assumed was seasonal by default. But default towns hold cookies, not resumes. Purpose grows heavy, but not harsh. Heaven prints it quieter, stronger, slower. Ravi didn't bring certificates of success this time. He brought survival receipts Winter handed him personally, because certificates celebrate talent. Receipts celebrate breaking. And breaking happened first in him. Karen brewed cocoa, not theaters. And theaters happen in smaller hearts only long enough. Tea kettles hummed psalm-like warmth over donation boxes the town youth once saved kindly. Ravi once assumed success begins by climbing higher. Unaware altitude builds appetite, not legacy. Life came at him fast. God came back at him on purpose later, Karen knew. She prayed not for his humiliation, but for his awakening quietly. Because awakening begins answering God first before answering environments. Karen stood holding donation baskets the same evening the train bell exhaled steam. "Some hearts break before they hold remorse properly," her friend Jimmy said lightly again. Karen nodded, smiling. Because notes of belonging float louder after snowfall quietly crowns both departure tags and foundation-level truths. Ravi bowed for his first winter personally, not theatrically. Winter nights burrowed in with him now. Reading altitudes like metaphor disclaimers Winter didn't annotate kindly months prior. But annotation belongs to heaven. In quiet chapters God cached ahead of departure pride transcripts. Karen brewed purpose over popularity in cafe corners warm enough to hold corridors, exposing humility into Winter's sermon folder. Ravi returned slower than snow. The youth market across town rehearsed mittens-based carols early this chapter. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 2 quietly. Unaware bowing is loudest to heaven quietly. Purpose held both seasonally. Ravi took his first Christmas donation lane personally, not trending. Karen handed cocoa as snowfall quilted rooftops. "Purpose crowns endurance differently here," someone passing said warmly. The church roof was frosted again when Karen sometimes prayed Psalm 2. Ravi exhaled steam, aware purpose wasn't altitude-coded anymore. Purpose greeted roots before applause greeted the name. Karen believed agreeing was different from kneeling. Kneeling echoes louder after snowcaps refine lane rhythm kindly. Ravi nodded, aware metaphors frost and thaw on time sent by God. Karen once said God prints footprints personally. Town footprints are theology here. But heaven prints deeper. The library kids rehearsed bread donations, fireplace kindled, not trending, Ravi once assumed. Now winter spiritual warfare melted him silently. Karen handed cinnamon coffee, gently aware seasons don't shout redemption but root-coated with warm quiet. Ravi returned. A different man. Karen packaged donation boxes Winter didn't annotate with ledger lists kindly months earlier. But God mailed the verdict first, quietly. Purpose was costumed in hope differently. Karen sometimes knelt after applause to store postcards. Youth didn't need viral disclaimers to echo CRT. Because echo is for heaven first. Purpose grows heavy, not harsh. Winter nights crowned donation baskets without coordinates. Ravi returned silently. That casual sermon prepared his redemption steps personally. Karen once read Psalm 2 quietly before dawn. Changes begin answering God first, she said. Ravi heard it differently now. Karen could smell the festival spices before she could hear the crowd. The Winter Festival was the biggest event the town planned all year. Strings of lights hugged the square like warm promises that glowed anyway. Grab a coat. Roads are slick tonight, volunteers joked, passing cocoa freely. Ravi stood by a quiet cafe window holding his own thaw differently now. Because faith-based endurance carries joy even when pride wants larger rounds. Winter whispered lessons he wouldn't translate fully until grace gave them meaning. Karen helped organize long wooden tables under Christmas decor for neighbors. Tables were ingredient-based metaphors. Nobody needed analytics to forgive. Ravi had returned smaller but deeper than altitude-earned legacy resumes. Karen wore mittens passing cocoa, changed heart's bow before they brag. Ravi didn't debate pilgrimage sermons anymore. He accepted cocoa first. God logged the appointment for renewal anyway. Families decorated the gazebo trees unbothered by roads slick. Winter's dropping fast. Grab coffee instead, Jimmy said cheerfully, stacking donation boxes. Karen sometimes recited Psalm 7, reading hearts not metrics when snowfall tapped signs not tides. Ravi's reflection looked humbler on seasonal slow shuffles. Purpose tasted like Christmas spice bread he never archived coldly this time. Because archiving belonged to pride. Homemaking belonged to God. Sure hope those likes don't freeze your thaw, Amber joked, seeing Christmas wreaths shimmering anyway. Karen sprayed gingerbread scents youth baked days before market giveaways not title tracked. Valleys don't need GPS when purpose drops kindly over coats given quietly. He liked carols once until ambition logged reasons not seasons. Now seasons invited him for supper, not metrics. Karen topped cocoa cups quietly, praying the heart grades differently there. But faith-based cocoa bows before any altitude envy. Ravi once assumed legacy begins by climbing out. She learned legacy begins by staying. Towns repeat gentle prophecies, shrugged casually anyway. Roads slick. Let's grab cocoa. Neighbors laughed. Karen handed coats for rides he once denied, mailing addresses kindly unknown. Changed hearts thaw with belonging long enough to grant small-town USPS-style postcards. But USPS was heaven-timed, not location-based. The town worship service hosted Christmas Eve readings with youth singing carols. Ravi held cocoa again, realizing storms drop silence before they deliver steel apology resumes. Karen didn't annotate the sermon transcripts. She annotated mugs instead. Because mugs hold presence longer than transcripts can brag location-based theology disclaimers. God prints return dates without ink inventories. Karen tops cocoa cups again gently. Ravi knelt that evening, unaware kneeling spread slower when winter-coated quotes meditate compassion, not altitude envy blocks. Karen sometimes whispered Psalm 3-based charity receipts quietly enough for the town to hold both. Faith rebuilt him softer than snowfall built her leadership quietly, Jimmy said. She served spice bread he never archived formally. Purpose grows kettle deep here. Lighter hearts bow first to heaven quietly. Youth carol markets box gingerbread donations. Friendship tracked, not trending tracked anyways. Ravi returned, knowing the heart grades differently in small-town theaters. Oatmeal disclaimers, nobody needed to archive fast. Karen placed napkins, bread, cranberry sauce recipes warm enough to remember names before winter. Tap spire roofs gently. Purpose logs daily steps, not mountain envy. She baked both without coordinates. Ravi held no resentment toward donation transcripts pride-coated roads winter once handed him. Karen didn't ask for apologies publicly, but coffee warms micro-expressions. Heaven calculates slower but precise. Some storms drop silence. Grace gives them voice when God schedules thawing depth, Jimmy said. Karen topped cocoa cups, smiling, aware seasons personally shape silence into success. Quietly, but widely deliver redemption, not trending tract. Families traded cocoa hugs better than transcripts. Karen believed forgiveness tastes like cinnamon spice bread delivered into cold nights without altitude envy summaries. Ravi nodded, rehearsing jolly changed hearts bow before they brag. Square churches fed purposeful quiet sermons printed physically into warped legacy truck seats day by day. The tree lighting ceremony hosted kids holding mittens, arms cold but cocoa warm anyway. Purpose journaled her endurance, not altitude-based. Ravi returned reading both winter sermons, the town youth baked gingerbread charts nobody needed to color code. Purpose bows when God prints it. Faith holds. Karen led neighbors lining the gazebo tables for rides. Sharing roads are brutal tonight, but cocoa hugs better here. Ravi smiled, smaller than swagger but warmer than envy. The town market didn't track trending postcards this season, because purposeful quiet chapters hold mugs longer than archives could delete. Karen baked spice bread for callouts, nobody needed sidebars for speed. Ravi didn't ask for big city fame coordinates. Purpose stayed. Purpose-based chat renewed him through cocoa, mystically unsponsored. Winter listened, not altitude-based. Ravi looked back, noticing community tables glow brighter than altitude ambition he once archived. Karen said purpose crowns endurance differently. Ravi heard it quietly too. Ravi parked the truck beside the old diner where locals met for pre-Christmas supper. The engine faded before his courage spoke. Courage begins softer in humility. Karen stood by the frost-dusted window, unaware his return mapped heaven's calendar, not applause. Inside her scarf-warm heart, purpose folded cocoa wisdom into appointments, not trophies. Grab a cup, winter dropped early this year, Jimmy said, passing coats. Kindness over coordinates. Karen didn't forecast questions. Winter forecasts enough metaphor for the soul quietly. Because some returns don't shout. They breathe near baked spice breads. Karen was decorating the church square gazebo for the annual Christmas Eve market. Market vendors traded spice bread recipes wrapped in humor, local enough to spread warmth, not likes. Ravi stood near her, stacking donation baskets, not pride-logged. God crowns endurance softer than swagger melts, she whispered, unaware winter crowned them both anyway. Larger rooms forget tones. Town gazebos don't need styles when hearts are hulled through exposure. Purpose logs daily steps, not altitude envy metrics. Ravi saw her distributing plates of turkey leftovers from Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving tasted like community, not absence. Karen sometimes cooked for neighbors, saying changed hearts thaw for the ground proudly unknown. Ravi believed digital fame icons melt faster than footprints. But footprints thaw slower when heaven approves the return quietly. The Christmas Eve market sign was hand-painted by local youth days earlier. Snow-capped nights don't lie, they polish, Amber joked, handing cloth scarves for rides no one needed trending lists. Karen topped cocoa cups gently, unaware his boots tapped purpose into snowflake ink appointments already heaven-logged. Vendors swapped donation pie bazaars without needing sensitive double-meaning tags. Because small towns bow first, then speak. Ravi once assumed purpose needs altitude to grade legacy differently. Now he read mercy in mittens, not manuscripts. Karen once said changed looks quiet, until God gives it public subtitles gently. Now subtitles of surrender thawed his posture nightly, personally. Karen led neighbors, inviting drivers to line iced donations for winter charity roads, polished slower than any trending postcards. Ravi looked down, saying nothing harsh. Town winter carols were sung by square youth markets, furnace-based cocoa lines warm enough to refine forgiveness, until his name sounded kneeling quiet anyway. Karen topped cocoa cups gently. Ravi held his first slice of pumpkin pie near Thanksgiving 3 months earlier. Thanksgiving cracked pride with appetite, not legacy. Karen saw that his steps were humble. Changed hearts bow before they brag, Jimmy repeated again, smiling. She placed spice bread quietly. Ravi once envied altitude blog transcripts. Karen sometimes distributed Christmas cinnamon roll charity markets, unaware his return depends on timber calendars, not coordinates. Out there, snow-tapped stained glass spires like small-town sermons no one needed to color code. Karen once said roads are brutal, Coco hugs better here, though. Ravi laughed anyway. The church gazebo lights were turned on by locals near dusk singing carols. Forgiveness didn't roar. It decorated quilts over cocoa mugs. Winter crowded donation returns in the square. Vendors swapped truths between pine crafts caring not applause. Ravi once leaned on fame that winter crowns personally anyway. But pride arched extensively quieter when storms dropped the envelope. God mailed the return recipe through her endurance quietly. Karen handed him gingerbread rolls for forested winter supper rails flowing. No trending snowflake-coated coordinates. Changed hearts bow before they brag, Amber said. Ravi nodded, smiling humbler than altitude envy could archive. Karen sometimes danced mittens into donation stands saying thaw resumes louder later, kettle deep in grace trending postcards not negative, but heaven earned. Ravi once chuckled quoting snow metaphors not altitude. Karen topped cocoa cups quietly. Ravi saw his draft small for big city fame. Karen saw his silence big for heaven's timing. Because silent returns speak louder after kneeling is warmed long enough by grace, not altitude. Karen locked the cafe door at the exact hour the town quiet finally spoke. Ravi stood outside, holding silence warmer than any smirk farewell ever hopped. Larger rooms forgot tones. The square cafe remembered kindness anyway, because some redemption transcripts are mailed slower than trending snowflake-coated coordinates. Purpose logs daily footsteps, not podium metrics, when humility sits quiet first. The church bell across the square chimed softly before the grand finale. It didn't shout victory, it whispered belonging, because belonging is louder to heaven anyway. Karen once prayed Psalm 3 over donation baskets months prior, unaware winter carries appointments too. Ravi bowed, hearing her cadence warmer, after silence refined his mailing address better than applause. The winter market gazebo lights flickered gratitude for community, not altitudes. Karen didn't run after statues. She built tables youths rehearse cocoa rations from. Ravi didn't ask for trending zip codes. He asked for cocoa from elders who repeat jokes like sermons. Apologies melted slower than trophies. Redemption was the slow candlelight she offered anyway. Karen stacked Christmas plates chasing resilience that carries truce appointments, not archived transcripts. Ravi smiled, molded by snowflake-coated verse recitals. Because verse recitals were louder, when winter bows for baking spice bread, not light-coded algorithms, self-sufficient. The town embraced the truth. Some hearts crack first to hold better later. Karen measured the forward appointments, not altitude-coded fame icons. Ravi read micro-expressions. Christmas couldn't annotate kindly enough. Winter doesn't compete. It crowns metaphors and pine crafts quietly. Purpose tasted spire warm anyway. Karen handed cocoa mugs to neighbors lined in truck seats winter had polished. Ravi wrote nothing harsh in apology. Harshness was winter's job before silence refined surrender's envelope differently. Karen sometimes said, grab a coat. It's brutal out here. Unaware, brutal was the mail route too slow for pride to interrupt. Ravi looked back, seeing the warm table lights youth once built for charity. Because hometown coffee warms hands before hearts speak louder. Karen led neighbors trading spice breads unbothered by trending lists. Karen once said forgiveness tastes like cinnamon bread warm enough for daily steps. Ravi laughed, hearing Grace whispered earlier, would crown his returning foundation-level season anyway, polished daily. The youth market sang carols furnace-based, warm enough. Purpose logs daily steps, not trophies. Karen believed legacy begins not climbing out, but bowing slower. Ravi heard theology postcards that afternoon. She topped cocoa cups, unaware God schedules return mail personally. Outside, snow-tapped stained glass shops like gentle sermons recited into slopes polished, not trophy-based, any more thankful. Karen served cocoa, not theaters. Christmas Eve volunteers stacked tables for families humility youth archived earlier, enacted daily anyway as community, not altitude-coded. Ravi returned mended by the winter prophecy, not altitude envy took flight early enough. Karen once whispered seasons shape valet-based CNA transcripts, not trending because trending is for scholars. Forgiveness is for God. Purpose here holds mug snow cannot archive. Ravi returned bow first. Karen believed agreeing is different from kneeling. Kneeling echoes louder after snowcaps refine. Ravi looked down. Karen sprinkled gingerbread rations round the gazebo teaching volunteers forgiveness transcripts. Ravi stored nothing harsh. Winter crowned both souls anyways. Karen served cocoa unbothered by trending coordinates. Ravi looked back, seeing community tables glow warmer than ambition storm clouds winter, once delivered into souls unseasoned, not Bible-coded. Ravi stepped inside the cafe, seeing Karen stacking Christmas plates, gingerbread youth once baked daily without coordinates. If this story touched you, let it change you. Pride can walk you out, but grace can lead you back. Subscribe to receive more stories that God rewrites, because your valley also ends differently when faith answers first. Amen.